Those of us who grew up watching Face Off know that it can't simply be categorized as an action film or a comedy film. In fact, we think the most appropriate description would be to call it a cinematic experience instead. On paper, it seemed almost pitifully destined to crash and burn, but it turned out to be one of those rare films that just defied all expectations. The utter audacity of its premise, the performances by Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, and that unmistakable blend of chaos and entertainment turned it into something legendary. It set the bar so high that even the thought of a sequel feels both ambitious and a little concerning. More than 25 years after the release of the first movie, Face Off 2 is in the works, and we all have the same question: can lightning strike twice? Even though the project has been stuck in development hell for quite some time now, many fans would rather have it marinate longer rather than getting something half-hearted rushed out. So, if you have been wondering what exactly happened to the plans regarding the sequel and why it's been so challenging to get it made, you're in the right place. Let's talk about exactly how Face Off became such a massive hit and why it's important to bring back that originality with the sequel instead of just making another reboot. Let's get into it. The movie that broke every rule and won. John Woo's 1997 classic is still considered one of the wildest, most perfectly unhinged action movies ever made. Call us biased, but that era of filmmaking was truly a golden age of high-concept action films, with each storyline more ambitious than the previous. The fact that Face Off is still one of the most memorable movies of that time period says everything about the film. It's 138 minutes of pure unhinged nonsense tied together perfectly with elements of sci-fi, and Face Off broke every rule set by Hollywood and managed to come out with a roaring success. It grossed over $245 million against a budget of just $80 million, but the critical acclaim was even more positive. 93% of the 95 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes are positive, with an average rating of 7.8 out of 10. It has an 82 out of 100, with near universal praise for the over-the-top action theme, molded beautifully with the classic 90s style of filmmaking. We're certain that had there been a different team behind this movie, it wouldn't have become the legend it is today. The role reversal between Travolta and Cage works really well with Woo's clever direction, and throughout the film, you find yourself reinterpreting every scene because the characters are actually playing each other. You'll rarely find a movie that received such consistent and stable praise from even the toughest film critics. Face Off also hit it big with the awards. It got an Academy Award nomination for Best Sound Effects Editing, which it lost to Titanic, and won Best Director and Best Writing at the Saturn Awards. At the MTV Movie Awards, it again hit the jackpot, winning Best Action Sequence and Best On-Screen Duo for the lead actors. Fans consider it to be part of the holy trinity of Nick Cage action flicks, along with Simon West's 1997 release Con Air, and Michael Bay's The Rock from '96. The actor himself remarked just a few years back that Face Off has aged beautifully. Andrew Lau's Infernal Affairs is rumored to have been inspired largely by Face Off, and the former was part of the inspiration for Martin Scorsese's Oscar-winning The Departed. So, you can see that Face Off wasn't just a niche concept film that had an underwhelming reception and over the years acquired cult status like many other movies. It hit the right spot right from the beginning, becoming a sensational release, and it's only become more beloved with time. I mean, I don't think we need to emphasize just how good a movie it is because the numbers speak for themselves, but here I am, still excitedly rambling on because that's just how exceptional Face Off is. The script that almost starred Arnie and Sly. Face Off could have gone horribly wrong, but one of the main reasons it didn't was because of the executive and casting choices. The proposed script by Mike Werb and Michael Collery was not what we ended up seeing on screen because the original was way more futuristic and sci-fi heavy, and it even had an extended scene in a futuristic prison. All of this was carefully trimmed, and the final script was highly simplified to make it fit the already absurd concept of the film. Rob Cohen was set to direct, and John Woo was actually not even confident about taking on the role after Cohen's departure because Face Off involved sci-fi, and he even turned down the offer initially. Can you imagine what a mess the movie would have been without him? Thankfully for us, the production changed hands from Warner Bros. To Paramount, and Michael Douglas stepped up as producer. Woo was then approached for a second time after he finished Broken Arrow, and this time he accepted. He was also in favor of a present-day setting with the face swap since it would play as something more psychological and emotional. Cage and Travolta weren't on board right away either, because the original script was written with Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger in mind. Other A-listers like Michael Douglas himself, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal, Denzel Washington, Wesley Snipes, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and even Harrison Ford were also in the running. Eventually, studios settled with Johnny Depp and Nicolas Cage, but the former passed on the role after reading the script. The penultimate choices were Alec Baldwin and Bruce Willis, before Woo finally settled on Travolta and Cage. The pair spent 2 weeks together before filming commenced because they had to learn about each other's mannerisms very intricately, and they also decided on which specific gestures to mimic for maximum cinematic effect. The use of the slash in the film's title had to be justified by the writers to a room full of executives and department heads, because most of them believed that it would unnecessarily confuse people. However, Collery and Woo insisted on it so people would think of it as a thriller and not a movie about ice hockey. They wanted the idea of face swapping to be part of the title itself instead of sounding like a battle or a match. Woo's Hollywood moment and the madness he pulled off on set. You've probably already gathered that we're pretty big John Woo fans, and the reason why we're stressing the original movie is that Face Off 2 had massive shoes to fill. It's important to break down the details of the original Face Off to understand that merely replicating its success isn't going to work, at least for today's audiences. It worked because the people behind it put in a crazy amount of work and basically just advocated for things that had never been done before. Margaret Cho, who plays Wanda, has mentioned how the filming took nearly a whole year to wrap, despite the film's timeline being stretched over just 1 week. In an interview, she stated the film involved many stunts. Face Off is widely recognized as John Woo's breakthrough moment in Hollywood, and that came from a place of immense sincerity and creativity. What he achieved on set is talked about by nearly everyone involved, even today. The iconic mirror scene almost didn't happen, but he insisted on it because Sean Archer and Castor Troy, to him, were perfect mirror images. He considered it vital to visually emphasize his duality using that very scene. The writers have remarked that it was part of the original script but was extremely expensive to portray, and the studio wasn't in favor of doing it because of how much it cost. Woo ended up paying for it out of his own pocket and asked for just 2 days to get everything set up because he just had to shoot it. Another nugget that many people might not know is that the face surgery scene's animatronics were done very painstakingly. The effects team went all out and did it so impeccably that you can actually see the veins and other blood vessels pulsating, as well as the small hairs, hundreds of which were applied to the skin individually. That jump scene was also done by Cage himself, despite having stunt doubles on set, because he wanted it to be as authentic as possible. The actor is very vocal about his fear of heights, and he's also said how shooting that scene in Face Off was one of the most frightening moments of his life. How the sequel was born, and the director who took the wheel. Fans have been pushing for another Face Off movie for years, and in 2019, Paramount expressed interest in a reboot with a new cast. Oren Uziel of 22 Jump Street and the Cloverfield Paradox fame was going to write the script. Neil Moritz from Fast X and David Permut from Hacksaw Ridge were to be the executive producers. However, these plans were scrapped just 2 years later. Instead of a reboot, the studio decided to go for a complete sequel and chose Adam Wingard to direct. His work on films such as You're Next from 2011, The Guest from 2014, and of course the bigger franchise inclusions like Blair Witch, Death Note, and Godzilla vs. Kong placed him in a unique position to bring the right directorial perspective that Face Off 2 needed. He's no John Woo, obviously, but fans welcomed the announcement because they were excited for his brand of sci-fi action. Wingard announced that he was going to write a completely new script along with Simon Barrett, disregarding the one that had been written by Oren Uziel. When we heard this, we were actually kind of relieved, because a complete overhaul meant less IP recycling and more creativity. Wingard was very confident in his work and emphasized that it was complete, in addition to confirming that Castor Troy would return in the sequel, despite having met his demise at the hands of a harpoon gun wielded by Sean Archer in Woo's original film. Simon Barrett actually discredited that whole scene because he doesn't believe that Castor died in the first place. This is because his body wasn't discovered when he was being loaded into the ambulance, and that does leave some room for interpretation, because why would a dead person be loaded onto an ambulance alongside a living one without a sheet being placed over his body? It's almost like it was supposed to make us think that he died, when it was definitely not confirmed. Wingard has been pretty insistent on having the original cast return for the sequel, because he didn't want it to be a fan service movie and envisioned it to be a follow-up from where things ended originally. He remarked how it was the most challenging script he had ever worked on because he was under immense pressure for it to live up to the 1997 film, and he intended to fix some of the latter's logical issues. Most notably, this will address that when swapping faces, the bodies of the characters will also get swapped, unlike what we saw on screen. In March 2024, Wingard again stated in an interview that the sequel was in the works and he was actively collaborating with Barrett. He said, "Right now that's still inactive, so I think the plan with that one will be that the writer will continue working, and whenever that draft is done, Simon and I will get it back and we'll take another crack at it." The project was put on hold for a bit due to Wingard's involvement with Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. The story they were building: children of Castor and Archer. The details surrounding Face Off 2 are still quite hazy, but Nicolas Cage himself has teased some possible plot lines. In 2023, he commented that the sequel would involve a lot of twists and turns and would be built on being unpredictable. He compared the original, where he and Travolta were at each other's throats as normal chess, and said that the upcoming film would also involve the children of the main characters, and then, with 4 people in the mix, it would basically become 3-dimensional chess. All 4 characters would meet at different levels and ping-pong each other, with everything becoming much more complex. He said, "I think there's a lot of fertile ground there. I had maybe one meeting in an office, but I haven't heard anything since, so I don't know." Barrett confirmed the plotline by tweeting he was honored that Cage liked the premise. Daniel Richtman also said that this was indeed true, but he didn't point out that Travolta and Cage would merely have supporting roles, with the children of Castor Troy and Sean Archer being the leads who face off against one another. You might not be inclined to believe that the original leads will simply play supporting roles, but Richtman probably saw this playing out on a recent production grid, so I don't think he should be discredited. And we have to say that's a little disappointing because, as we've said before, the magic with Face Off happened mostly because of Travolta and Cage's on-screen chaotic chemistry. We're just not sure any other pair of actors, especially the younger Hollywood generation, could really portray it similarly. Moreover, this plot about their respective kids becoming each other's enemies could be quite messy to navigate. Adam, Castor's illegitimate son, was adopted by the Archer family at the end of the 1997 film, so if he's to turn against Sean's biological kid, does that mean he had a falling out with his new guardians? Or was he dumped into the foster system later and nursed a desire to take revenge on the Archers for the same? Your guess is as good as ours, but the face swapping, at least, has been confirmed, so it'll be interesting to see how Adam fits into the equation. Some fans have even suggested that the face-off will involve Adam with another son of Castor, with the former as Sean's kid, since he was already adopted by them. Maybe this direction was taken to double down on the emotional fallout of the original's ending, rather than ignoring it. The delays, the strike, and the cast question. For the longest time, Wingard steadily maintained that Face Off 2 was developing in the background, but he got deep into the Monsterverse during that time. He said that the script he worked on with Barrett was in the process of being finished for good, as it was sent to a third writer for a revision pass, but the writer's strike happened just around that time, so again, things had to be halted. Like many other legacy sequels, this is the annoying bit where the project gets stuck in development hell. Coming to casting, things are again mostly unconfirmed. Cage has directly spoken with producer Neil Moritz and has expressed considerable interest in returning, as was evident from his teasing the storyline. It's reported that he intends to portray Castor as a black and white villain. Unlike him, John Travolta has been much quieter, and the only update we have is Wingard stating that the actor will return only if he's genuinely impressed with the script. Considering they don't have a concrete script, I think it's safe to say that Travolta is still on the fence about reprising his role. There's been no word on Joan Allen or Dominique Swain reprising their respective roles of Eve and Jamie Archer. In fact, Allen was actually not even aware that a sequel was in the works until she was specifically asked if she was going to return. Surprisingly, Pedro Pascal has said that he would be interested in joining the film if there was a role suitable enough, despite being heavily booked and busy with The Last of Us and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The bombshell exit, and where Face Off 2 goes from here. The latest update regarding the sequel came in February 2026, and sadly, it wasn't good news. Adam Wingard exited the project after having been attached to it for nearly 5 years. Currently, it seems the role of director is still vacant. We don't know exactly what prompted the exit, but apparently it was mutually decided by both parties. If I had to guess, I'd say that Wingard's schedule is already too packed, and the drawn-out process probably got to him. He was initially very excited about it, which is why he stuck it out for 5 years, but now it's an open assignment for the studio and other filmmakers are reportedly pitching their ideas regarding the film. If you ask us, this isn't great news. We didn't expect Wingard to recreate what Wu did, but his enthusiasm kept a lot of fans grounded and gave them hope that, despite the delays, the movie was still being worked on. Paramount still wants it to happen because there's been no announcement saying the project has been cancelled. Wingard and Barrett's draft also exists, but we don't know if it'll be used, reworked, or discarded by whoever signs up next, whenever that may happen. It goes without saying that there's a lot of interest from the studio, from fans, and even from one of the original actors, but after 7 years with no shoot date, cast, or release window, Face Off 2 remains stuck in the development phase. For all we know, we might get a concrete update tomorrow and have the film released in just a year or so, but that seems pretty unrealistic, so the sequel is probably going to languish for a lot longer before we get any more good news. I don't think there's anyone on the fence regarding Face Off. This is the kind of movie you either immediately dismiss for being absurd, or you commit to it fully. It's among the top movies of the 90s, even outside of its genre, so on one hand, we appreciate that a lot of work is going into chalking out every detail of the sequel so it doesn't butcher its predecessor. But it's also been 7 years, so we deserve something more than, "It's probably gonna happen soon, we promise." That said, here's our question for you. Which director would you like to see take on this job and get the film to the finish line? I don't know about you, but personally, I'd love to see an Edgar Wright-directed Face Off 2. Sadly, that's the end of our video, but if you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons because they really help us out a lot. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll see ya in the next one.